Well, we are still talking about human resources staffing issues and how we go about interviewing and selecting our candidates. We've gone through most of the stuff that's really necessary to take into account in order to create job descriptions and have effective interviews. So now we kind of turn to some other things that surround that, not so much the process itself, but how we plan for the process. How we kind of, in chapter 5 at least, how we think about what we're going to need and in terms of the numbers and what we're going to have available. If we think about economics from the terminology of supply and demand, the forecasting is the demand of people we're going to need, and the planning part is the supply of people who are going to be available in the community and internally to meet those needs. As you can see from the labeling of the lesson here, this is chapter 5, and theoretically this comes before what we just did, which was chapter 6. Understanding what we need is important in the big picture normal sequence of things before we start looking for where to find them. But again, for the purpose of our class and our project and being able to meet some deadlines on the interviewing project, we cover chapter 6 before we cover chapter 5. But today we talk about, in this video, chapter 5a, that portion where we're talking about forecasting and planning. And let's remember, again, from the economics standpoint of things, that we have to determine in our planning processes the demand and the supply. The demand is the number of people we will need and the type of people that we need. We know that over the next year, over the next 3 years, we're going to need somebody in this role and somebody in that role, and the turnover says that we're going to need 4 or 5 people in this particular role, or we're going to need 8 people in that department of the organization. That's the demand, what we are going to need. The supply is how many people are going to be available to fill that need. So the numbers of people and the types of people that are going to be available. Some of those people are going to already be working for us, and some are going to come from outside the organization and join our team. So as we think more in terms of the demand, and we think about what we're going to need and why we're going to need that number, let's talk about some things that influences what we need. There's a number of things that influence what we are able to hire and what we're willing to hire, understanding that the two are necessarily the same thing. The first thing that influences the number of people that we are able and willing to hire is seasonal demands or output demands, because there are certain times of the year, especially for a lot of organizations, where where we need more people than at other times of year. You think about maybe UPS or some package delivery system around Christmas has an incredibly high volume, so they hire people just for the Christmas season. I can sit at my home after class gets out for the semester in early December, as people are starting to buy their online packages from Amazon and whatnot and have them shipped through UPS or FedEx, mostly through UPS, I guess, where you can just be looking out the window and some guy will be driving down the street with a golf cart and a trailer hitched up to the back of it that's loaded down with packages. And he'll pull up in front of the house across the street. He'll jump out, he'll look through the packages, he'll get a box, and he'll run it up to the door of the people across the street and either get somebody that he can hand it to or leave it on the front porch. Or maybe he'll pull up, it's probably more likely at our house because I've got several young females in the house who like to order things online. Then he'll pull up in front of our house and he'll come out every single day, maybe even twice a day, with a couple of packages that we've ordered online. They don't do that really at any other time other than Christmas, because Christmas is just such a high volume. That is what we would call seasonal demands, when certain parts of the year are busier than other parts of the year, and we need extra people for those periods of time that we're not going to need all year long. That the agreement that we have going in is we're hiring you for the next month, and after that we don't need you anymore. We pay you a little bit extra because there's no long-term security, but you're probably looking for something short-term. I remember my dad telling me that when he was in his winters during his college, that he did something like that, where he delivered packages or something, and he made a lot of money in a short period of time because he was willing to work at a very demanding job, physically demanding, but for a fairly short period of time. Another seasonal type of job is like a Six Flags kind of thing that really isn't open during the winter. They're open long hours every day during the summer. At some point, they scale back and it's only weekends. For the fall, early part of winter perhaps. And then there comes a point where they're never open at all unless it's something really special like New Year's Eve. And then they'll have folks. So during the summer, Six Flags will hire bunches and bunches and bunches of people. And then at some period of time after the summer is over, they let most of them go, and they may hire a few people here and there, but for the most part, that's the end of it. So seasonal or output demands have a big influence on how many people we hire and how many people we're able to hire because there are more people available or less people available. Another thing that determines what we can hire is our competitors. Supply and demand from a competitive standpoint. Market share is a big part of this. If we have a lot of competitors, we probably have a lot of the same kinds of jobs. And so people like me who are looking for jobs have a lot of different options. I want to be a warehouse clerk. Any one of you 6 people who have organizations are hiring, and I have a choice of any of you 6. But you're I'm competing with a handful of people for those 6 jobs. But you, as the employer, are competing with a very small number against a lot of other competitors. So when there are a lot of competitors, the supply is going to be lower because some of the folks who could be working for us are working for our competitors. When we have somebody new come to the marketplace, some of our employees might want to leave. Recently here in Americus, we've had a new fast food restaurant open that is very similar to several other fast food restaurants we've already got. But what makes that good for the worker is that somebody who works for the one that's already been here says, hey, this new one has come to town. They're hiring for people. I've got experience. I might can make more money, or I might like the environment better. So when we have new organizations, new competitors, we may lose some people who would prefer to just a change of scenery, who might get a little bit better pay or better benefits or something like that. But from the same perspective, when we're in an industry where there's 3 or 4 of us and one of them goes out of business, the owner retires or can't sustain things financially or decides to relocate to another city, then there are a handful of employees who no longer have jobs there and they become candidates for us. So competitors can influence how much we hire and who we hire because they're either taking away from us or they're providing more for us or they're draining the pool locally so that there are fewer options for us. And they also impact not just in the sense of who they hire and the quantity they hire, but it influences what we can do because of what they already are doing. If they have a higher pay, it's going to impact the kinds of people that we have who are willing to work for us, because why would you come work for us if you can make more money with them? We'll talk about that in a later chapter 10 or something like that, where we talk about our pay structure and whether we're low market or high market or whatever. But the benefits that they offer, again, if you can come to work for me for a little bit of insurance, or you can go to work for them and they agree to pay all of your insurance. Why would you pay part of your paycheck toward insurance with me if you don't have to pay any of your insurance in your paycheck for them? So what our competitors do has a big influence on what we're capable of doing. Another thing that influences what we can hire is the economy. When the economy is good and there's a lot of money, it may be that there are fewer people looking for work because they've got jobs. But when there's a lot of money in float, we can go to the bank and we can get money and we can pay people. We can hire people. When interest rates are high and we have to borrow money, we may not borrow as much because we don't want to pay the interest on that money. As minimum wage increases, if I have to pay somebody $7.25 an hour, I can hire so many people. But if I have to suddenly pay people $10 an hour, remember that I've got a limited amount of money that I can spend on wages. I may have $100 a week I can spend on wages, and I can either hire, one person to work 10 hours, or I can hire 10 people to work 1 hour. But if that number changes to 15, I still have the original $100 to spend, and now I have to divvy it up in blocks of 15 rather than blocks of 10. So I might be able to hire fewer people or give people fewer hours. If the minimum wage rises, it affects my employment because I may have to raise prices to continue paying you or to hire new people, or I may have to lay off some people to save their money to give to other people, or I may have to have less profit for the owners or invest less in equipment and benefits and things like that. But the economy has a big impact on what we're able to do as an organization. Legal things and regulatory things, regulations from organizations like the Environmental Protection Agency or the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Organizational Safety and Health Administration Agency, OSHA, SEC, EPA, you can name a whole bunch of different things, the Department of Justice and EEOC and things like that, put in guidelines that we as organizations have to follow, and that impacts what we can do in terms of our hiring. Because if they introduce some piece of regulation that requires me to spend money to improve my safety or to cut down on my waste that I expel into the community, that's money that I don't have for salaries and for hourly wages. So that can have an impact. But also from the perspective of legal and regulatory, there are times when our local governments or our state governments or our federal government pass laws that require me to do certain things, and that impacts what I am able to do. Or they pass a law that says that if you have 20 or more employees, this affects you. Most of your labor laws that we've had, like Title VII Civil Rights Act or the Age Discrimination and Employment Act or the Americans with Disabilities Act, have a minimum threshold of 15 or 20 or whatever. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, has a minimum of 50. If you're under 50, it doesn't apply to you. If you're over 50, it does. So when something like that gets passed, if the target is 50 and I know that I've got to do this thing that's going to cost me money if I have 50 or more employees, if I've got 51, maybe I let 2 go so that I fall under that 50 range. If I had 48 and I'm looking to expand, well, I can only expand by 1 because then this thing kicks in that costs me a lot of money. So laws can impact how many people we hire. Regulations can impact how many people we hire. The next thing is tax implications or financial implications. And kind of related to the government and the regulatory and the legal and the economy and things like that, there are times when there are incentives given to hire certain kinds of workers, like the Vietnam Veteran Era Reinvestment Act or whatever it was called, says that if you hire Vietnam veterans, we'll give you a tax break and you'll have to pay less in taxes for those folks. Or if you hire minorities or things like that, we'll give you breaks. It may be that there are pieces of our compensation structure or our benefit structure that impact us tax-wise, that's pre-tax or it's tax exempt or anything like that. And putting money into these buckets of compensation gives us tax breaks. I remember when Lowe's came to town a number of years ago, that one of the things that enticed them is that the local governments said, if you will come and you will build a Lowe's store and you will hire X number of people, we will not charge you city taxes for the first 3 years or something. So that may be an incentive to locate somewhere and hire an awful lot of people that you wouldn't have otherwise, and that influences the number of people. If they offer that to Lowe's, they may hire some people away from the local mom and pop hardware store, which impacts the local mom and pop. The next thing that can influence the number of people that we hire is consumer spending. It makes sense that our hiring and our wages is a function of our profits. And as our profits go up and our demand for our products and services go up, we need more people to fulfill that demand. And so as our profits go up, we can afford to pay people more, or we can afford to hire more people. So if the economy, if the population and the environment in our local area, if for example in Americus, if the economy is bad and people are not spending money on eating out, then restaurants can't hire as many people. They don't have as much money coming in. But if you're in an area that's kind of booming and people have a lot of money that they can spend, they're not paying off debt or saving it or whatever, they're going out and they're watching movies or they're going out to eat or they're buying boats or whatever, when money is flowing easier and faster and quicker or whatever, people who run businesses that supply those services or those products can afford to spend more and hire more and whatnot. Another thing that influences the number of people that we hire is the employment or the unemployment rate. When the unemployment rate is high, remember that a lot of people are out of work. So when there's a lot of people out of work and looking for work, we have a big pool to draw from, and we can pick and choose and maybe have to pay less. But when the unemployment rate is low, a lot of people are working, very few people are looking, and when we go to find somebody, there's not many people to choose from, so we may have to pay more. So high unemployment people might be willing to work for less simply because they got to have a job. When there's more of them. When unemployment is low, people will expect more because they've got other options, and the pool is smaller. So the unemployment rate has an impact on the number of people that we hire. And then we just talked about that. The last thing is turnover, the number of people that we have who leave. As we lose people, or as we have to let people go, lay them off, fire them, whatever, or as we have people who retire or people who pass away, we have positions to fill. So our turnover creates a need to hire. And as we have more turnover, good or bad, we have more slots to fill. So that influences how many we can hire. If we have an organization where people come in and they don't leave, like my wife who runs the preschool at our local church, they had their end of the year program the other day where the kids get up and they're supposed to be singing the songs that are on the CD, but they're basically looking at the audience. She made the comment before, I guess at the end of it, that they really have kind of noticed lately that the trend in daycare, childcare, pre-K kinds of programs is that teachers come in and they work a few years and they leave. So the turnover is relatively high every few years. But she said, we got to look at our teachers and we've got folks that have been here for 15 and 20 years, and that's really unusual. So she's in the perspective where her turnover, at least from the basic staff, she's got the afternoon people who are college kids and whatnot, but the core staff who teaches during the morning don't leave very much, so she has low turnover and she can't hire people because there are no open jobs. Whereas in the afternoon, the lady who runs the afternoon program sees people come and go pretty frequently, and there's a lot of turnover, so she does have the opportunity to hire a lot. So within that one organization of the First Baptist Church Preschool, there's a segment that has very low opportunity to hire, and there's a segment that has very high opportunity to hire. So that kind of impacts. So there's a number of different things. This is probably one of the shorter videos, yay for you, you don't have to listen quite as long, that kind of gets us thinking about what causes us to have to look. What are the factors that influence how crazy we can get when we are hiring? Can we hire 30? Do we have to only look for one? Whatever. As we're thinking about the future, the next year, the next 5 years, what are the things that may make it necessary to hire or make it difficult to hire? We use that as we move into lessons 5B and 5C, where we start looking not so much at the context or the environment of hiring, but the way that we go about doing it. So that's what we're going to pick up in the next